I didn't want to say on Earth because there might have been someone here that was, wanted to argue with me.
Could be. Of course, you're not wearing red today, so.
Doesn't show up good on camera.
So, welcome, Chris, and we'll end up probably 10 minutes early with questions. Time so you have a lot of them with great presenters, so welcome to it.
Thank you, Caston. Thanks. Okay, so the topic that I'm going to speak about today is in the realm of application security. And I know that a lot of the things that I've seen in the conference, are information security, red teaming, and things like that. So I'm going to go into something that I'm very passionate about, and that is application security, and how do you roll that out to an entire organization. So I have been the CEO of my own consulting company here for just since January. But I've been in the security business for 20 years, doing many different types of roles, incident response, secure engineering, application security roles. I also spent 10 years at Cisco Systems prior to January, and was part of the Cisco Secure Development Lifecycle team, part of the internal AppSec function there. I had a chance to learn a lot and apply a lot of the principles and things that I'm going to talk to you about today. So this is the agenda of what I want to do in our about 40 minutes of time here. First thing I want to do is just explain what I think of as the problem space, or why do you need this thing that I call application security awareness? What are the reasons behind it would even be something you'd want to consider in your organization? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call sustainable security culture, and some things that you can do to change the security culture of, from an AppSec perspective, InfoSec, anywhere within security, we all have a security culture. And then I'll talk about how you can build one of these programs yourself, using some principles and things that I've learned over time. So a famous philosopher from Silicon Valley by the name of Mark Andreessen, who also happens to be a multi-billionaire and big investor, he made this statement about 5 years ago: software is eating the world. And I think it's still a relevant thing, even more relevant as the years go by and we have more and more products and different types of things that have software embedded in it. If you think about the number of computers and the lines of code that run in a brand new automobile this year, software truly is everywhere. And, if we're going to have software everywhere, we have to have application security everywhere, combined into, this overall solution. I think about things like power plants and medical devices, where software has been kind of protected in its history. As those interfaces are starting to become more and more out to the world, there's a lot of bigger challenges there. So customers demand security in everything, right? I mean, we probably all could just nod our heads and say, yeah, I mean, have you ever sat across the table from a customer and they said, yeah, that security thing, it's just not that important to us. Our data is not that important. We're more into availability and making sure that the systems are always up and, they never go down. But if you lose the data, it's okay. No, nobody, everybody is fired up about security now from a customer perspective. They want to ensure that you have the right security features and functionality and process, and a lot of times they want you to prove it to them. So the OWASP Top 10. Show of hands, you're familiar with the OWASP Top 10? Okay, almost everybody. Leave your hand up if you live and breathe the OWASP Top 10. A couple of diehard AppSec folks. The OWASP Top 10 is just it's a list of web application security problems that we've had historically. It's about 10 years old at this point. And it provides a nice container. OWASP is a great organization for lots of different information related to AppSec. If you've never visited the OWASP website, you definitely should go there and find a program or a project to get involved with. But when I think about the OWASP Top 10, we've been having these same vulnerabilities over time, right? We're not getting any better. These things haven't changed much in the last couple of revisions, and they're doing a new revision now. And my prediction, you heard it here first, is it's probably going to look almost the same as this one, right? Because we're not getting any better at solving these problems. And I want to start a new project called the OWASP Top 1, because if we could just knock injection out, just imagine how good, all of our web apps and our systems would be if we could just not have SQL injection involved in it. So I introduced OWASP Top 10 just to show a nice graphic from the good folks at Veracode. They went and did this survey to see, how many apps fail the OWASP Top 10 upon initial assessment. And that's the percentage of apps that failed. If you look at the government, 76% of apps that were assessed failed the OWASP Top 10 on the first time through. Financial services comes in at 58%, and that's the best score, that they found in their research here. So that tells me that we're not getting any better at fixing these problems that we have. And if we think about where do vulnerabilities, where do they enter in the process here? So this is, a very simple approach to the secure development lifecycle. It's requirements, design, development, test, and release. And what I find in my travels and in my experience at Cisco and other places is the majority of those vulnerabilities actually get they come into the system via the design and development phase. And more times than not, this is mistakes, or it's bad, or what I call bad or uninformed decisions. Okay? This is not a negligence problem. We don't have developers that are generating vulnerabilities on purpose, right? They don't understand what they're supposed to do to correctly deal with these problems. And so if you think about the relative cost to fix vulnerabilities, okay, this slide, I'm almost ashamed to leave it in here because it shows up in almost every, application security related talk these days. But I think it's still a powerful message because, if you fix the vulnerability during the requirements phase or what could become the vulnerability, it's very inexpensive. If you wait until after it's released, it gets very expensive, 30 times more expensive based on the research IBM did back in the 70s of all places. So, this is an argument for the fact that we need to teach the developers and the testers, and we need to try and fix things, further back in our overall process. And so that leads me to think about the mindset of the average developer. Okay? And so if you're a developer in the room right now and you're at a security conference, I got news for you. You're not the average developer that I'm talking about. Okay? You're somebody who's passionate about security. You've already, you've caught the security bug and you want to make things happen with security. I'm talking, when I say average, I'm talking about those people who maybe don't know anything about application security. They're charged with writing code for a particular feature and they don't know what they're supposed to do. They're measured based on their code being bug-free, not necessarily security bug-free, but that will play in. But, how bug-free is their code? Is it on time? Is it feature complete? And is it on budget? And I think about, these average developers are the people that actually need, more assistance here in the process. Because security is a stretch for them. They don't understand what the real problems are. If you tell them that, there could be a SQL injection problem or vulnerability in that piece of code, if they've never actually, been taught what a SQL injection is, you're asking them, you're speaking, a different language to them, which, we speak a different language in the world of security. And we gotta level that playing field and help everybody to learn that language with us. Developers aren't monsters, right? You're not introducing these vulnerabilities on purpose. It's accidental. They want to do the right thing. They just don't know what that is. Granted, sometimes they can be stubborn, along the way in the process, but, they're not negligent. They're not trying to do this on purpose. I mean, sure, there's 1 out of 1,000 developers that might be negligent, but you'll find them via other means in the process. So the goal that I always work towards here is I want to generate a culture where developers think like security people. Okay? And, a lot of people throw around the terminology, they say, well, I want our developers to think like hackers. Okay? I don't want developers that think like hackers. Right? I want developers that think like security people, that know the policies, the process, the procedures, as well as the technology, all working together, in one type of a solution. Ultimately, we want the security light bulb to go on for them, and I've seen that happen in my travels at Cisco where I'd be working with a team and explaining to them, how to do threat modeling. And, in the beginning, they're just pushing back on, you're just asking me to do busy work and things that just don't matter. And then you go through the threat modeling exercise with them, and all of a sudden, the light bulb goes on. We had one where a guy actually got up and said, I gotta go. We're like, where are you going? We're in the middle of the meeting. I gotta go fix some code. I got that problem you're talking about, and it's killing me right now that it's in my code. So, it comes down to, how do we get that light bulb to go on for them? So another philosopher from Silicon Valley, Tim Ferriss, famous for the 4-hour work week, which I don't think actually works, but, maybe it does. I think it's just an idea. But he had this great definition of culture that he threw out on Twitter, and I just added the with security into it because, I thought it was just a really pointed, explanation of what I think of when I say security culture. What happens with security when people are left to their own devices? So do they make the right decision when nobody's looking over their shoulder because they're educated, they know better, or do they just take the easy way out or do whatever is going to be fastest to get the product to ship? And that's the true measure of your security culture. We can talk metrics and other things all day long, but if you don't have developers that are making the right decisions when nobody's looking, it's a lost battle there, and you have to do something to change the culture along the way. And so, application security, these are two kind of things that I like to kind of summarize up, about the application security problem. First of all, application security is about the people, okay? And the people are the ones who introduce the vulnerabilities. Now, tool vendors are going to disagree with me heavily on this point, okay? They're going to say that application security is about the tooling and the technology, okay? I violently disagree. The tooling and the technology is a great support platform, but if the people don't know how to actually use the technology, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? Was Grady Booch, famous computer scientist. That was a quote from him, but it applies to security tools, right? If you turn somebody loose on a tool and they don't have any idea what the principles are and what it's supposed to be doing, they may get results, but they're not going to know what to do with them, And that's the problem we have when we do static analysis, of code. And we have somebody end up with a 50-page report, and they're like, I can't do anything with this. And they just toss it away. They say it's too complicated, it's too hard. So, it's about getting the people to the point where they're ready to, be able to deal with these issues. Okay, so a couple of reasons for why we would want to change a security culture. Okay? And yes, clearly I have made some bad decisions. Okay? There's bad decisions that are potentially being made in the organization. They're being tracked. They're manifesting as bugs and vulnerabilities and things. So there's some number of those type of problems. Maybe the process is broken, or maybe you don't even have a process, right? I mean, if you don't have a secure development lifecycle at this point, then that's something that you got to take a very close look at, because that's the book that you go back and point to when somebody says, I don't have to do static analysis. Oh no, we have a process that says these are the things that happen at each level along the way. And then the tools, you may have the tools, but they may not be tuned. You may not have tools at all, as part of your overall, security culture. So when I think about a security culture, I like to think of this in the context of a sustainable security culture, okay? Because it's really easy to get something to change for a day. Slightly harder for a week, a little bit more harder for a month. We start to talk years. That's really hard to get things to change, the duration that lasts over a long time. So anything that we do from a security culture perspective has to be focused on how do we make this sustainable so that it exists 5 years from now, even if the people that created it are no longer with the organization. Maybe new people have come in to take on this role or whatever. So the first thing that I like to think about from a sustainable security culture is it has to be deliberate, so it has to be on purpose, and it has to be disruptive. If somebody is not in your office screaming at you because of the change that you made, you did not go far enough in your culture change. Okay? So that's a great metric, right? Is somebody angry to the point where they're yelling at you about what you've done? That's a good thing from my perspective. You might have to apologize, but that's okay. Second thing is we want it to be engaging and fun. For so long, and it just kills me, security, we've always been the department of what? What's the one word that people always associate with us? No, right? We're the department of no. We're the stodgy people that don't allow the developers to have any fun in the organization. So we got to change that perspective. We got to figure out how do we engage, how do we make this idea of security more fun and more cutting edge. We got to become the department of no but. not just know. We want to help them do cool things as well and encourage them on. Sustainable security culture has to be rewarding. Okay, you have to have some way to recognize people for doing good things. People love to be recognized, right? Some people thrive on just receiving an email from their manager that says, hey, you did a good job. Most of us are like, cash deposits in our bank account. But you got to find ways to reward people for making the right decision, because over time they'll start to do those decisions and become part of just how they do things, how they do business. The last part is the idea of return on investment. So we do have to have some type of metrics that can be shared up to the executive level to demonstrate here are the things, here's the reason why this culture change is successful. Here's how the organization is changing over time, to justify the fact that we're going to need money to make these things happen. So that has to be, it's probably the least fun of all four of the things on the list there, but it's a necessary thing to, for the success of your program. Okay, so how do we change the security culture? We're going to focus on the humans. So now we're getting into kind of my methodology of how I think about how to change a culture. So the first thing we have to do is we have to open the developers, testers, other people's eyes. Okay, this is an awareness play. And this isn't awareness in the traditional security awareness space, right? We already have lots of people that are doing that. This is not just anti-phishing. Don't let people chase you through the door. Don't let, when Microsoft calls you on the phone, it's probably not them. It's not that type of training that we're looking at here. It's a foundational set of application security things that we want people to know. This is the basic idea of what's the difference between an exploit and a vulnerability, right? When I walk around an organization that I'm working with, I love that if I can just walk up to someone at random and ask them that question. Right? Because if they have that level of understanding, it doesn't mean they're a security expert, and I'll never ask them to be. But it means that they have that foundational understanding of what goes into AppSec. The second thing is we need to start filling their brains. Okay? And this comes down to knowledge. We need to provide them with some facts and some details on our process and how to use our tools, and all the different pieces that are contained within our application security program. They need that knowledge perspective. And the third thing is we got to fill their brains with history. Okay? If your company is older than a year, you probably have some bug database that tracks back security vulnerabilities and security bugs over time. And that's a great place to mine for data to feed into your security culture program. Because, you want people to understand the problems that the company's had in the past so we don't repeat them in the future, right? So what I like to do is I like to look and see, what are the top 10 problems that a company's had, and then I like to make sure that those get interwoven into the culture changing program right from the beginning. Because we might as well go for the things that have been the biggest, let's go for the biggest problems, and maybe that means we focus on just 3 of them or 1 of them, but focus in on that historical view. Then the last part of filling their brains is it has to be role specific. Okay? You cannot expect a developer to be entertained by a vulnerability scanning set of content, right? Unless you're operating in an agile world where developers are doing all the different testing and roles and things. And maybe you're there, but in the traditional sense, you have to be role specific with your content. So if you have developers, set up some different roles for them. If you have people that are specifically Java programmers, give them learning, on secure coding in Java. And don't expect them to sit through a C course, right? Because it's not practical for them, and that'll immediately cause them to kind of say, this program is just wasting my time, And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid anybody, having a negative opinion of what we're trying to do. The next part is tasking their hands. So if we're going to take this knowledge and we're going to try to stick these facts into people's heads, we have to have them back it up by actually doing something over time. So I saw an interesting chart. It was like the 6-month window from the time you take training until, the time you take training until 6 months later. And the graph looks just like this. This is what you knew the day the training ended. This is what you'd know at the end, which is almost 0. So the 6-month retention of the things that we learn, like in a classroom environment, is almost 0, unless we actually get to use those principles. You know, if we can put those things into use, then we remember things a lot better. And that's where this activity comes in here. We have to have activities set up in this culture-changing program for people to actually take the principles from the learning and then start typing on their keyboard and making stuff happen. You know, whether it's secure coding or doing a threat model or running a vulnerability testing tool. Those are the things that really cement these concepts in people's minds. Then the last thing is, you know, this culture-changing program has to have a community that starts to wrap around all the people who are passionate about security. These are called many different things in different companies. I've seen them called security champions, security advocates, security guild members, you know. But they're all talking about the same exact thing. Let's get a group of people who love security together and let them mentor and bring other people in. And let's use this as a way to challenge people, help them to grow, but also build our security capability. And you can do this, you know, with online communities. You can do this with monthly training meetings. You could even get as crazy as having an internal security conference. That's what I did at Cisco. I ran, you know, big internal security conferences where we brought 500, 1,000 people together that were passionate about security. So that's the community angle of this. And so this idea of application security awareness is kind of, from my perspective, this is where all these things come together. You know, from an awareness and from a knowledge, activity, and community. How do you wrap that around into a program that you can actually deploy within your organization? And so this is how I think about, you know, where application security awareness fits on the security learning spectrum. So I already talked about, you know, the general security awareness kind of sits off to the left side here. And then I think of what I call traditional security training sitting to the right-hand side. That may be it might be instructor-led in a classroom. It may be video-based. But the challenge that I have, and the challenge that caused me to even go down the road that I've gone down to build these type of programs is, you know, traditional training's boring, right? I mean, if you think about the last couple of training classes you had to do for work, you know, was there one of them where somebody wasn't reading off a script to you? And we just don't learn when people read off a script to us. It just doesn't, you know, we're all very good at hitting play and then doing something else and then coming back and passing the assessment that's required, you know, for that compliance, right? And security, you know, learning shouldn't be a compliance activity because, you know, we all know that compliance doesn't actually cause change, you know, it can cause, you know, a kind of a level set across an organization, but there's not going to be any big change that happens there. So, you know, the benefits here, everybody gets a foundational knowledge, you know, developers learn those detailed lessons, we get some activity, and we get that community kind of coming together, you know, as the benefits of what these things can do. So, you know, this talk is not specifically about what I did at Cisco, but if you're curious about the program that I built there, in the 5 years before I left Cisco. There's a blog post on Cisco's website that they didn't delete it when I left the company, which was nice of them. But you can go and just read, and there's a nice video there that gives you an example about this application security awareness. What does it look like in a big company like Cisco? You know, how did it play out? So, and these slides will be available after the talk as well, in case you didn't catch that one all the way. So let's transition now from kind of the problem space and talking about culture into how could you actually build one of these things in whatever organization you sit in? And I'm convinced that, you know, small organizations, big organizations, everybody can do this. It just comes down to scale, right? You don't necessarily have to have 100 people, you know, to make this possible. You can do this with a small group of people along the way. And it really comes down into 4 different pieces of this type of a program. You know, you have to have, like everything, you have to have an architecture. You have to figure out what you're going to do with your content. And then weave in the idea of humor into your content. And I'll go into some more details about that. And then, you know, the gamification of learning is a very popular thing right now. And it's about how do we use video game principles to connect with our learners and engage them in the process. So we're gonna, you know, from an architecture perspective, this is our overall design document for a program. And there's some steps that we want to go through along the way to, you know, help us ensure that this program is actually going to meet the needs of the consumers that exist in the company. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to assess the security culture and figure out what's actually happening there. And, you can do this, informally. You can do it formally. There's methodologies like OpenSAM from the OWASP project, where it's a maturity model where you can kind of go through and rate your company based on different levels, and it gives you a good idea as to where you stand. Informally, and the way that I like to do this is to do, focus groups and interviews. And, when I go into a company to do these, the company always sets up all the interviews. And then I say, let's go walk around for a minute. Because now we're off script, right? Now we're going to walk down the hallway and I'll see somebody say, what do you know about security? And then it's not a prepared person that came off the interview list. And it makes people mad sometimes, but it gives me the answer I need, as far as, am I getting the right answer in the interview room as actually happens in the company. So, but you really got to have a good handle on the security culture, because that allows you to define what is the actual problem that this company is dealing with. Do they lack general AppSec knowledge? Do they not understand this idea of the threat landscape, that threats are constantly changing and mixing up and making our world more complicated? Do they not have any experience with secure development, or maybe they're lacking motivation? But you got to figure out what that is in your organization, because it's going to be different from, everybody's going to have a different list here of what the problem actually looks like. And then another thing that's very important is to build up a team to assist with this. And in the past, I've built teams of internal and external people that support this overall mission of creating, one of these types of programs. You may have folks that help you with content, reviewing content, subject matter experts on particular technical topics that are, specific to your company. Then there's a whole bunch of people in the learning process that I really never knew about until I got into building these things. There's people they have the coolest title ever, psychometrician. It actually says on their business card. And what that means is they're experts in learning. So most of us in the room are security people that love security, but we're not the best teachers and we don't build the best content. We have very technical content, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the learner understanding. And that's what these psychometrician people do for you, and they're priceless. Because they can take very detailed security content and turn it into, they make small adjustments. You look at it and go, really? But it influences, it helps the learner to understand the content better, because that's what they're experts in. That's what they go to, college to understand. It's good to have different people on this team as well. Don't just get everybody from engineering. Invite some people from IT. I'll even dare say invite some people from marketing and sales. But try and have a very diverse, functional team to ensure that you have the best possible perspective on how to solve your problem statement. Another big thing that I like to do here is, if you want to make this thing fun, you got to have a theme for your program. Okay, you can't just call it the security training time. That's boring. Nobody wants to go to that website. So, I've done various different things in the past. I'm a big fan of the idea of security ninjas, and you might think that's kind of, not that cool or whatever, but it gives you a lot of room for cartoons and all kinds of fun things and it's crazy how many people in a company that are developers say, well, I want to be a security ninja. That sounds kind of cool. So the theme becomes your marketing platform, which, we're technical people. We don't like to think about marketing, but, if you're going to do something like this, you have to have a marketing function. You have to get the word out because you want more people to get into the program. You can do, security apprentice, security journeyman. You can find a theme that's specific to your organization because it's going to be different, right? So what do the people like to do in your company? Is there something? Maybe they play ultimate frisbee. I don't know. Maybe you can have multiple levels in ultimate frisbee or something. I don't know. But figure out what that is and connect it into, what your group is passionate about. Second thing is you have to have levels in this program, okay? You can't just do this as one class because there's not enough, you can't pack enough into one class and then it gets really long and hard for people to consume. So the idea with levels is we break up the learning and the activity into multiple channels for people to go through here. And this is an example of what I do when I use the security belt metaphor. And, when somebody begins their process, they can see where's the end of this journey, right? When you take an average technical class, there's really no path to it, right? You just take the class and you're done and you're like, great, I'm a Red Hat certified something or whatever at the end. But there's no path to say, here's how I become an expert or someone who's has advanced knowledge. And that's the idea with these levels is show people that you earn your white belt and then you want to continue until you get up to that black belt and you're seen as a leader, inside your team, inside your group. And then from a roles perspective, you got to figure out what are the roles you're gonna capture in your program here. Are you just going to go after traditional software testers and managers? Maybe those are the three, usually the easiest ones to hit. But maybe you've got a DevOps function, or you've got IT or sales and executives that you want to cover. So you just got to figure out what are those, what are the roles you want to go after. This is a map of what I recommend from an activity perspective. So when you get to those high levels in the systems that I create, you actually have to go to work for security. Okay, there's no longer any, watching videos or whatever. You got to actually do things. And so I built this list, and you're going to look at this and you're going to say, "Wow, that's really high level." And the answer is yes. It's very high level on purpose. Okay, I don't want a list of 1,000 activities because I don't want to manage a list of 1,000 activities. And I'm a firm believer in the keep it simple method of doing everything. Figure out how to. If someone has 100 of something, let's see if we can compress it down to 8. And just keep everything simple for everyone that's involved in the process. But those are, and you can adjust those activities over time. Year 1, you may have a certain set of activities you want to encourage people to do. Maybe by year 2 or 3, something's changed in your company and you need to focus on something else. You can use these as a driver. When you get people excited about wanting to earn the next belt, this becomes their playbook of what they're going to go and try and do. And then recognition is another, important piece of this. And I've done various things in the past to recognize people. I've created custom lanyards that have the color of the belt that allow them to show off the fact that they've learned something new. Certificates, emails. Certificates have, different value in different parts of the world. So if you're a global company, India and China they put a much higher value on receiving a certificate that they can print and hang on their cube wall. So once again, it comes down into looking into your existing company and seeing what are the recognition things that we have available that we can use. And I think, like I said earlier, cold hard cash is always a great motivator for anyone, right? Because then they can do whatever they want with it along the way. So security culture change is not an overnight program. Okay, you're not going to just go launch something and by next Friday you're going to be like, wow, we got this figured out. I mean, you're in this for the long haul. It's going to take, the program I built at Cisco evolved over 5 years from the time we started and had the idea to when I left it. And we saw a lot of good things happen over that time, but it took that 5-year window. Now, we may be able to accelerate that and see some good return in 1 year, 2 years, but it's definitely not a 2-week program and we move on. So the approach I take to content, okay, so I like to use small 20-minute video modules maximum for a topic, okay? And I'm even trying to compress those down to closer to 10 minutes now because we have this idea of the YouTube generation, right? Nobody wants to watch 60-minute long pieces of content. They want them to be short, to the point, and, hit the high points, tell me what's important, but don't belabor me with, hours of explanation. I like to use what I call conversational and unscripted. Okay, so get some security experts, put them in front of a camera, use some PowerPoint slides as a backdrop, and just have real conversations about security. If you get the right passionate people on camera, that passion shows through to the person who's watching that video later, because there's nobody reading off a teleprompter, reading off a script. It's the passion that they have about security that makes the video interesting. So I do that in an interview format. Think about why do so many people watch Jimmy Fallon, right? Because they like to watch the interview and see what questions they're going to be asked. It's just an engaging format. It's fast, it's moving, the cameras are changing all the time, and it just makes content that's more interesting. For each module, you want to make sure you test the individual on what you wanted them to learn. I try not to do this. I try not to make this PhD class in security, This just comes down to let's use this as a way to reaffirm the most important key things that I had in that module for them to understand, and try to make these as fair as possible in the process. And that's where the psychometricians come in too. Is they're experts in how to write test questions. So they can help you from, writing test questions that are just not fair. Because I tend to write questions that are not fair for people that don't speak English as their native language. Because I tend to use double negatives and things like that, which for us, if you're a native English speaker, you read right through double negatives in a question and answer it just normally. But if you're not a native English speaker, that double negative actually will really trip you up a lot of times and cause you to choose the wrong answer. So that's where the psychometricians come in, and they help you in that process. Resources. If you're going to have a module, if you're going to use this type of a compacted format, some people are going to finish that module and they're going to say, wow, I really want to dive deep into this and learn more about it. So give them those resources right away. Put it as a tab right in your interface so they finish the video and they're like, I want more information. If I did a module on threat modeling, here's some examples of maybe what somebody might want to go look at for more information. Here's just a single slide that shows you kind of my perspective from some basic things I always put into my kind of level 1 or my white belts. And you'll notice there's really not any technology-related things in that level 1, in that white belt, because I want that to be applicable to everyone in an organization, right? Not just technical people. I want executives, sales. I want everybody to have that foundation of AppSec, because when they have that foundation, it can positively impact their job. And, how can that impact the sales process? Well, salespeople get asked questions about security all the time. And most of the time they say, I don't know, let me take that as an action and go back. But if they have a basic understanding of what your SDL is, they're not going to be an expert in it, but maybe they can answer a question by saying, yeah, we have a security development lifecycle. We have security baked into, and built into every phase in this. The customer's going to go, whoa, cool, great answer. And then when you get to level 2, it becomes more about, and that gives you an opportunity to jump into the technical side and dive deeper into, things like secure design principles, secure coding and attacking. And I like to focus on things like input validation and, output encoding and the things that really trip up the developers of that language very specifically. Hit those big problems and go right at them and try to eliminate them from the process. This just gives you a view of how I create content right now. This is the process that I use and what I recommend for folks to do. It begins with an outline, and you'll notice that the instructional designers, those psychometricians, that they're called both of those terms, I bring them in the early after I have an outline, and then I bring them in to review my content that goes into the PowerPoints, because they can provide interesting feedback at both stages there. They can help me in the outline to make sure I don't go down and do a bunch of work that they're going to say is not really, good for the learner to do. This is just an example slide of, this is from my fundamentals module that I use these days. This is the type of content that I use as a backdrop to a conversation that I might be having, on video. When I'm talking about, how vulnerabilities, exploits, and attacks run together. I've got definitions, and then we're talking about, we'll talk about here's the definition of those things, and now how do these things work together? So that the person can actually cement that in their mind, that it's not just an independent thing, but, vulnerabilities become exploits, which become attacks, in the future. Okay, so if we get into the idea of humor and story, so we got to find a way to make this content a little bit more interesting for people. Okay, so the conversational nature of the content tends to be more engaging, and it's harder to just hit play and walk away. But we got to find ways to bring humor into directly into the content. So what I like to do is I use these things I call security metaphors, and a security metaphor is just a short 30-second clip that I append right at the beginning of the module. And sometimes I'll create a whole series of those type of metaphors that tell a story. I've done some in the past with just, 3-frame cartoons with voiceovers, and they tell a story about this village, and all these different people are attacking the village, and the people that are attacking become, kind of metaphors for different type, denial of service. Somebody dumps dirt into the well, and the people are struggling with how are we going to get water, So it's a way to take a security concept and illustrate it, in a different way with some pictures and cartoons and things. So there's 3 different ways that I've done this type of humor. I mentioned the still cartoons. I've done full motion cartoons. Those get a little bit more expensive. You start talking about thousands of dollars to do full motion cartoons that do jokes. But you can also, if you have a creative video team that you're working with, you can actually create some pretty funny metaphor type stuff, just by using the video resources that you have. When I was at Cisco, we created various different spoofs of movies, for example. So we did a spoof of the movie Office Space, which some people will remember, in the room here. We had one guy dressed as Milton, and it's funny because he was a college kid who had never seen Office Space, so he went to YouTube and he watched the clips of Milton, and then he got his costume on, and we set him up on there, and the joke was that somebody had taken his network tester, and he was, but it's, and it's not supposed to be, comedy movies that you're going to find, in the box office. It's just, you want to get people to smile a little bit and think, yeah, that's kind of corny, but, it's funny. Good job for trying to mix things up and make it more fun. Now, a word of caution on the humor front. Okay? Corporate humor, turns out, is not universal. Okay? Everybody doesn't find everything as funny as you may. Okay? So what I try to do is, and it's kind of funny, is I found this picture before the Deadpool movie actually came out. But, it's good to strive for a TV PG rating. So if you're going to do anything, it's going to be for corporate environment. If you aren't comfortable saying that's TV PG or a little bit less, then you're probably pushing that. That's an envelope you don't want to push. Okay, I've pushed it and had to retract some videos and things that were really funny, but it didn't fit in the culture. So just be cognizant of that, of a TV PG kind of rating. So a couple of things quickly about the world of gamification. A lot of people think, gamification, that means we add a video game, Pokemon Go, into the middle of our learning environment, and people watch modules with different locations when they find Pokemons or something. I don't know. No. So gamification is about the principles, right? Why do people play that Pokemon Go game? There's probably some lessons that we could apply to a training program because they got so many people to jump in and be a part of it so quickly. So gamification can play out, using things like badges. Okay, somebody finishes a certain number of modules, they get this badge. They finish a level, the levels become part of the gamification angle as well. Maybe they finish a level, maybe they get a badge that shows a white belt that goes on their internal directory. It's amazing how many people think that's a really cool thing and a really valuable thing. And if you think about it, it costs almost zero for us as people who are creating the program. You have a graphic artist draw this badge, you post it on the website as a potential badge that can be added, and it's cheap. Recognition plays in there, the journey plays into the gamification angle as well. So when you create a user interface for your training program, don't just make it a web page with a list of links on it, please. That's why we have a theme. And that's why we're trying to make this fun. Build an interface for the learning that fits into the theme. If you're using the Security Ninja idea that I've used in the past, build a Security Dojo page where all the modules are listed, and you use colorful graphics that are created in the same form as the rest of the theme. And you can do something, this is kind of a poor man's version of this, but, as people start to finish modules in a series, you can have maybe the wall starts to fall down. So they're working towards something visual in front of them that's part of their learning journey, One last thing about gamification, the idea of competition. So competition, turns out, is a huge benefit from a game perspective. And so what I recommend that people do is create a leaderboard type of an environment, type a dashboard that allows you to track who's received different levels within your culture-changing program. And then what you can do is you can actually show different executives, here's how you stack up against your two peers. You're at 10%, they're at 60 and 90%. Just wanted to show you, and then walk away quickly. Because their operations director will be sprinting to their office, after they get that phone call. Why am I getting beat by these other two people? The executive may not even really care why or what it is they're getting beat at. They just don't want to get beat at it, right? So use competition to your advantage, and let that drive, the program that you have. So, a couple of takeaways here. Vulnerabilities are real and everywhere. We saw that, in that Veracode OWASP top 10, and we know that from our own existence in our own companies. If you want to change culture, it starts with opening the eyes. That's the awareness side. Filling the brains with knowledge and history of where you've been and where you're going, and then tasking those same hands with activity. And I think of the programs as there's architecture, content, and there's humor and story, and then gamification. All of these things, you need all of these pieces to have a successful program that people actually enjoy. You can get away with leaving some of them out, but you're not going to have the same impact as you do, if you do all those things. So I guess my call to action here is that, you can build one of these things yourself if you want to, It's not going to look exactly like I describe here, but that's okay. It's going to look like your company and your process, your perspective. But you can definitely build one of these your own on the way. So with that, here's my contact information. You can, there's my email. You can find me on Twitter as well, talking about these types of things quite a bit. But I would love to take some questions here. I left us a good, I don't know, he's not holding the iPad up, a good 5-10 minutes or so for questions. So I'd love to entertain a bunch. I'm going to stay in front of the camera so I can repeat the question too. Yes, sir. Yeah, I think that's a flawed, I think that's definitely a flawed, because then the next round, unfortunately the next round it gets pushed too. I've seen that happen so many times where, we'll just do it in the next release. We promise. Yeah, you promise. And then the next round, then we had to push it out again because we had this other customer thing happen. So that's how I would answer. That's how I would fight back against that type of concern, is to say, well, no, I don't really think you're gonna, you want to sign a contract, says you're gonna give me $50,000 if you don't. And they're gonna be like, no. Why is that? Well, because we're probably going to push it. So. Yes, sir. Right here.
So, I've had this theory for a while.
Okay.
You have a slide at the beginning that said something to the effect that developers don't. You said code, right? We all say that.
Yep.
And I was thinking about it. I ever met a developer who actually say the word, I don't care about security. I don't think I have.
Nope.
And so I think, so I'm wondering, I just want to see that on the comment. If developers want to think of themselves as security, what they lack is information management. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's what I've seen in programs that I've built in the past. It's like I said, developers are not monsters, right? They're not. It's not that they don't want to know. They just nobody's taught them the lessons. And once you teach them those lessons and that light bulb goes on, they're changed forever, right? We're all in this room because we know once you get into security, there's no getting out, right? It just changes your mindset, your perspective. You look at things differently, You start threat modeling when you're walking in the airport, looking at all the different potential problems that could exist. So yeah, I think it's definitely true that they're never going to say that. I've never heard anybody say that, but they don't have to say it to their code and whatnot backs up the fact that it's not important to them. So yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's raise that awareness level, raise that knowledge level, and then you can go at people that are just apathetic and say, I don't know. Then the people that don't care will start to rise up to the top, because they'll be the ones that have the most vulnerabilities in their code and whatnot. So. All right, any other questions? Okay, one. I'm going to go over here first. Well, from yeah, I didn't have. I haven't had any like from a competition perspective where it became a problem. I had people trying to sneak stuff through the system. That was a bigger problem, more of a fraud. They were putting in activities that they weren't actually doing because they wanted to get to the next level. And we had to kind of investigate them and had one guy who posted all of the answers to the white belt test to his entire group, and he actually had the audacity to say, "What? This is a problem?" I'm like, Are you kidding me, right? Of course it's a problem. I mean, you just completely circumvented this whole thing. So, so I haven't had any real negative. I've had some negative perceptions from the metaphor perspective because we made some decisions. We used some imagery that we didn't even realize was offensive to some people. So it wasn't on purpose. So the HR department got involved and looked at it and gave us a ruling. And they said, you're not really at blame because we didn't know. We just used this artwork and didn't realize it was offensive. So that was probably the biggest problem I've ever had. And we could easily correct that though by saying we're just gonna change the graphics. We didn't mean to offend anybody in this process. So I think there was another question over this way. So the roles definitely. So, from everything that I've seen, you have to target the training, the information towards what the person does, right? There's nothing people hate more than having to do some training that doesn't apply to them. So it has to be tailored towards what you want, what you're looking for them to do. The internal certification thing, I've stayed away from that in the past, only because of the cultures that I was in there. What you have to be very careful with is